The summons arrived with all the subtlety of a parking ticket slapped onto destiny. One moment I was calibrating a food synthesizer that refused to understand the concept of extra cheese, and the next I was being escorted by 6 armored guards who looked like they could bench press my self-esteem. No explanation. No warning. Just a politely phrased order that translated roughly to, "The princess requests your immediate presence." Compliance is encouraged. Encouraged, apparently, meant being marched through a palace so opulent it felt like it was judging me personally. Everything gleamed. The floors reflected my face well enough that I could watch myself make progressively worse life choices in real time. By the time the doors to the inner chamber slid open, I was already rehearsing my apology for whatever crime I hadn't committed yet. She was waiting. Alien royalty tends to have a look, regal, distant, terrifying in a way that makes you suddenly aware of how bad your posture is. The princess exceeded expectations. Tall, luminous, draped in fabrics that shifted color with her mood, which at the moment appeared to be some alarming shade between desperation and determination. Her eyes locked onto me like I was the last functioning appliance in the universe. The doors sealed behind me. My translator implant hummed softly, the universal sign that my life was about to get complicated. She stepped forward, hands clasped, chin lifted with ceremonial poise. "Human," she said, voice smooth and intense, echoing just enough to make every word feel legally binding. "I require your assistance." That was fine. Normal, even. Assistance was my brand. I helped machines that didn't want to work and people who didn't want to read instructions. I nodded, already relaxing. Then she inhaled sharply, and her composure cracked. "I beg you," she said. The word hit the air like a dropped plate. My spine went rigid. Begging was not something princesses did casually, at least not in any culture I was familiar with. My translator helpfully added emotional subtext, urgent, intimate, deeply personal. "I beg you," she repeated, stepping closer. "You are the only one suitable." Somewhere in my brain, every alarm I'd ever installed started blaring at once. Suitable for what? Diplomacy? Execution? Some sort of ceremonial sacrifice involving chanting and minimal clothing? I swallowed. "Princess," I said carefully, choosing each word like it might explode. "I'm honored, truly, but maybe we should clarify. I need you to satisfy me." There it was. The sentence. The one that detonated whatever remained of my professional composure. Satisfy. The translator did not hesitate. It delivered the word with brutal confidence, complete with a helpful emotional overlay that screamed long-term deprivation. I glanced around the chamber. No witnesses. No cameras. Just me, an alien princess, and a sentence that definitely did not belong in a diplomatic handbook. My mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "I'm not sure I'm authorized for that." Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her bioluminescent markings. "Authorized?" she echoed. "This is a personal request." That did not help. At all. She paced, clearly agitated, hands flexing. "I have tried everything. Meditation. Advisors. Stimulants. Restraint. Nothing works anymore." She turned back to me, eyes burning. "I cannot endure another failure." Failure. Right. That word, at least, I understood intimately. The translator, however, seemed determined to sabotage me. It layered her words with implications that made it sound like she was one bad night away from declaring a state of emergency. "I was told humans are resilient," she continued. "Emotionally reckless, yes, but uniquely capable of recovery after humiliation." Humiliation now. Fantastic. My brain latched onto that like a drowning man to driftwood. "Humiliation," I repeated. "As in, public?" Her shoulders sagged. "Always public." I nodded slowly, buying time while my internal monologue sprinted in circles. This was not how first contact training had prepared me. There were no slides for alien royalty begging for satisfaction. There was a slide about smiling politely and another about not insulting anyone's ancestors. That felt insufficient now. I want to help, I said, because that was true, even if I had no idea what helping looked like. But I need to understand what you're asking. She hesitated, then gestured toward a low table in the center of the chamber. With a dramatic flourish that suggested ancient ritual significance, a concealed panel slid open. She produced a box. Rectangular. Cardboard. Familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. She opened it. Monopoly stared back at me. For a long second, either of us spoke. My brain attempted to reboot. The translator fell silent, as if embarrassed. This, she said reverently, lifting the box, is where I always fail. I blinked. Once. Twice. That's a board game. Yes, she said. A merciless one. The relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. No seduction. No ritual consummation. Just capitalism, in its purest, most friendship-destroying form. I laughed, a short, hysterical sound I couldn't quite stop. You beg people to play Monopoly with you? I asked. She stiffened. Not play, she corrected. Compete. And lose with dignity. Ah. There it was. The missing piece. Emotional validation. The translator chimed back in, suddenly cheerful, updating definitions on the fly. Satisfaction. Sense of emotional completeness achieved through shared competitive engagement. I rubbed my face. So when you said you needed me to satisfy you. You are human, she said. You understand how devastating loss can be. And yet you continue to play. I stared at the board, at the tiny plastic houses, at the iron token that had ruined more evenings than I could count. Somewhere, an entire galaxy had misunderstood this moment, and I was standing at ground zero. There's something you should know, I said slowly. On my planet, this game ends relationships. Her eyes widened. Then you truly are qualified. She leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. In my culture, losing this game is grounds for political humiliation. I looked up at her, at the hopeful desperation on her face, and finally understood. Oh, I said softly. You're serious. She smiled. I always am. Somewhere beyond the sealed doors, I could already hear the faint rumble of consequences warming up. The board was placed between us with ceremonial precision, as if it were a sacred artifact rather than a mass-produced instrument of emotional damage. The princess adjusted her posture, spine straight, hands folded, eyes fixed on the cardboard like it might insult her if she blinked. I, on the other hand, slouched instinctively. Years of experience told me that respecting Monopoly was the fastest way to lose your soul. She cleared her throat. Before we begin, I must warn you. This contest is binding. Everything is binding to you people. I muttered, then louder. What kind of binding? Social. Political. Romantic, in certain contexts. I froze. Romantic. She tilted her head. Extended engagement often leads to attachment. Is this undesirable? That depends entirely on how aggressively you tax utilities, I said. The translator paused, then rendered that with alarming sincerity. Her cheeks flushed a deeper shade of violet. I will restrain myself. She opened the box with reverence, laying out the pieces carefully. Tokens gleamed under the light. The tiny houses looked smug. The money was stacked in exact, obsessive piles. I noticed there were no instructions. You know the rules? I asked. She nodded. I have memorized all 17,000 recorded variations. Of course she had. Okay, I said. Then let's agree on one thing first. Yes? No flipping the board. Her expression darkened. That is an act of war. Good, I said. We're aligned. We chose tokens. I reached for the dog out of habit. She stopped me. That one symbolizes loyalty beyond reason, she said softly. It would be inappropriate. I took the iron instead. It felt right. Cold. Heavy. Full of regret. The first few turns were tense. She rolled with surgical focus, lips moving as she calculated probabilities faster than my implant could track. I landed on Baltic Avenue. She inhaled sharply. You may purchase it, she said. I know. You hesitate. I'm emotionally preparing myself, I said, placing the bills down. This is foreplay. The translator did not censor that. Her pupils dilated. Humans incorporate anticipation into competitive bonding? Oh yeah, I said. Nothing brings people closer than mutually assured resentment. She smiled faintly. That was new. Dangerous. As the game progressed, she grew increasingly expressive. Every loss of currency hit her like a personal failure. Every time I passed go, she stiffened. When she landed on my property and paid rent, her shoulders slumped. I am inadequate, she said quietly. It's just a game. I replied automatically, then stopped myself. That was the wrong thing. Always the wrong thing. I mean, it feels personal. That's normal. Her gaze snapped to mine. You feel this too? Princess, I said, leaning back. I've seen marriages end over this. The translator conveyed that with solemn reverence. She exhaled, tension easing just a fraction. Then I am not alone. That was the moment it shifted. The game stopped being about winning. It became about surviving together. We joked, well, I joked. She attempted humor like it was a foreign language she'd been warned not to mispronounce. You seem pleased, she observed when I laughed after drawing a card that fined me. I enjoy pain, I said. It's cultural. She considered that. Is that why humans form relationships so quickly? Sometimes, I said. Other times it's because we make eye contact while tired. She rolled the dice. Doubles. Her eyes lit up, triumphant and startled all at once. I am rewarded for persistence. Yes, I said. Don't get used to it. As the board filled, so did the air between us. Knees brushed. Hands hovered too close when exchanging money. Every accidental touch sent a jolt through me that had nothing to do with the game, and everything to do with proximity. Adult tension, unspoken but thick enough to trip over. You are very calm, she said at one point. Even when losing. I've lost worse things, I said. Including dignity, several times today. She smiled properly then, not the practiced royal curve but something real. You make failure seem survivable. That hit harder than any rent payment. I made a choice. A dangerous one. I played badly. Missed opportunities. Passed on properties I should have taken. Let her build momentum. When she finally bankrupted me, it happened quietly. No drama. Just the slow realization that I was done. She stared at the board. At her money. At me. I won, she said. Looks like it, I replied. Congratulations. Her breathing quickened. She laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound, and then clapped a hand over her mouth as if afraid she'd be punished for it. I feel satisfied. The translator, traitorous as ever, broadcast that sentence loudly. Every communicator in the palace chimed. A disembodied voice echoed through the chamber. Royal update. The princess has achieved satisfaction through prolonged engagement with a human male. I closed my eyes. Somewhere, diplomats were screaming. Somewhere else, someone was already misquoting that. She looked at me, horror dawning. It announced it. Yeah, I said. It does that. Doors began to unlock. Voices rose beyond them, excited, outraged, confused. She reached for my arm, gripped tight. You must stay. Princess, I said gently. I think we just changed foreign policy with a board game. Her fingers didn't loosen. Then you cannot abandon me now. The dice sat between us, still warm. Outside, the galaxy leaned in, very interested in what I was going to do next. By the time the doors fully opened, the rumor had already outrun reality. That's the thing about palaces. News travels faster than light, especially when it's scandalous, partially mistranslated, and involves a human doing something he absolutely did not intend to do. Officials flooded in first. Advisors, aides, cultural liaisons, all trying very hard not to stare at me like I was a loaded weapon with bad table manners. Behind them came the diplomats, tall, spined, gelatinous, feathered, every species that had a vested interest in the princess's reputation and, more importantly, her political standing. The air buzzed with overlapping languages, my translator working overtime and still somehow making everything worse. "Is it true?" someone demanded. "Has the princess been fulfilled? Was it consensual? Was it competitive?" The princess straightened, chin high, reclaiming her royal bearing in one smooth motion. "I was victorious," she announced. That should have ended it. It did not. A murmur rippled through the chamber like a seismic wave. Victory meant legitimacy. Victory meant leverage. Victory meant that a royal who had never once prevailed in the trial of acquisition, apparently the formal name for monopoly, had finally done so with a human at her side. That detail mattered far more than anyone was comfortable admitting. I felt a hand settle on my arm. Her hand. Steady, warm, grounding. Possessive enough to send a very specific message. I leaned slightly closer, lowering my voice. "Just so you know," I said, "this is the part where things spiral." She glanced at me. I sensed that when 3 ambassadors began arguing over my railroads. Sure enough, 2 representatives were already in a heated dispute over whether my former properties now constituted sovereign territory. Someone accused someone else of hoarding houses. Another threatened sanctions over free parking payouts. I caught the phrase, economic seduction, at least twice. Then a tall, scaled ambassador stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "We challenge the legitimacy of this outcome." The room fell silent. "On what grounds?" the princess asked coolly. "On the grounds that the human manipulated the game," the ambassador hissed. "Humans are known for psychological warfare." All eyes swung to me. "I wouldn't call it warfare," I said. "More like emotional improvisation." The translator rendered that as weaponized empathy. That did not help. The ambassador continued, "If the princess's satisfaction was achieved unfairly, then her political elevation is void. We demand a rematch." "A rematch?" I echoed. "Yes," the ambassador said. "An open tournament. Observed. Recorded. Binding." My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. With who? With everyone. That was how I found myself seated at a much larger table hours later, surrounded by beings who looked like they'd never lost anything in their lives and were deeply offended by the concept. Multiple boards were arranged, all identical. The princess sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "You are tense," she murmured. "I'm about to start a trade war with a game invented to teach children about capitalism," I said. "I think that's appropriate." She hesitated, then leaned in closer. "You do not have to win." That surprised me. "I thought winning was the whole point." "For them," she said softly, eyes flicking toward the other competitors. "Not for me." The signal was given. Dice rolled across the tables like thunder. Immediately, the tone shifted. Where our earlier game had been intimate, awkward, almost tender, this was brutal. No jokes. No pauses. Pure, ruthless optimization. I watched as alliances formed and dissolved within minutes. People whispered. Deals were struck. Someone tried to confiscate the bank. I played the only way I knew how, honestly. Not optimally, honestly. I negotiated. I joked. I accepted bad trades if they made sense emotionally. The aliens did not know what to do with that. "You are sacrificing long-term advantage," one competitor accused. "Yeah," I said. "That's how humans keep friends." They recoiled like I'd admitted to a crime. Midway through, something unexpected happened. I started winning. Not because I was smarter, but because they couldn't predict me. They didn't understand why I'd trade a monopoly for peace, or why I'd laugh when I landed on someone else's hotel. Their strategies depended on fear of loss. I didn't fear it. I'd already lost. The princess watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe? Or something warmer. When the final turns came, it was down to me and the scaled ambassador. The board was a minefield. One wrong roll would end it. Silence fell as I rolled the dice. They bounced. Settled. I landed on their property. Rent was due. Enough to wipe me out. I looked at the board. At my remaining money. At the princess. She met my gaze, eyes searching, trusting. I could negotiate. Beg. Stall. Maybe even flip the board and trigger an actual war. Instead, I slid my money forward. I'm bankrupt, I said. The chamber erupted. What is he doing? He forfeits? Is this a tactic? The ambassador stared at me, stunned. You concede? Yes, I said. You win. Confusion rippled outward. The princess inhaled sharply. For a moment, I worried I'd misread everything. Then she laughed. Not politely. Not quietly. She laughed openly, freely, the sound cutting through the chaos like a blade. He chose to lose, she said, voice ringing. He was not defeated. The translator, mercifully, got that right. I stood. Where I come from, I said, addressing the room. Losing doesn't mean humiliation. It means you played. And if you played with someone you trust, that's not failure. That's connection. They didn't understand. Not fully. But they felt it. The tension eased, just a little. Enough. The ambassador stepped back, unsettled. This changes nothing. It changes everything, the princess replied. I am satisfied. This time, no announcement followed. She took my hand, fingers lacing with mine in a gesture that was very much not ceremonial. You risked disgrace for me. I shrugged. Humans do that. A lot. Beyond the chamber, alarms that had been primed for war slowly powered down. Trade routes recalculated. Sanctions were reconsidered. All because I chose to lose a game. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. No explosions. No dramatic arrests. Just a palace full of very important beings trying to process the idea that the most dangerous move in galactic politics had been voluntarily losing a board game. I stood there with empty hands and lighter pockets, waiting for someone to declare me an idiot or a criminal. Instead, people avoided my eyes. Not out of contempt, out of uncertainty. They didn't know how to categorize someone who had thrown away victory on purpose and still somehow won. The princess didn't let go of my hand. That detail mattered. Council members whispered. Advisors recalculated probabilities that no longer behaved. A trade representative from a species that communicated entirely through scent looked physically nauseated. The concept of intentional loss was clearly giving them indigestion. Finally, the High Arbiter cleared their throat. Human, they said, choosing the word like it might detonate. Explain your action. I shrugged. I was done playing. A ripple of discomfort moved through the chamber. You forfeited power, the Arbiter pressed. You relinquished advantage. Yes, I said. That's usually when humans stop hating each other. The translator hesitated, then delivered that sentence with uncomfortable accuracy. No embellishment. No euphemism. Just raw intent. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that precedes either enlightenment or a very expensive mistake. The princess stepped forward, still holding my hand, still smiling in a way that was absolutely not appropriate for formal proceedings. He understood the purpose of the trial better than any of you, she said. It was never about ownership. It was about endurance. One of the counselors frowned. Endurance of what? Humiliation, she replied simply. And connection. That landed harder than I expected. A few beings shifted uncomfortably. Others looked thoughtful. One actually nodded. The Arbiter studied us both. If this interpretation is accepted, they said slowly, then the outcome of the tournament is irrelevant. Exactly, I said. Which means no one lost face. That was the key. I could almost hear it click into place across 100 alien minds. No loss. No shame. No need for retaliation. Just a shared experience that ended without anyone being crushed under it. A junior aide raised a tentative appendage. Does this mean the trade dispute is resolved? The arbiter exhaled. It means, they said carefully, that we may have been taking this far too seriously. The princess squeezed my hand, delighted. Welcome to playing with humans. Laughter followed. Uneven, uncertain at first, but real. The tension that had been wound tight across interstellar relations loosened, just enough to breathe again. Agreements were amended. Challenges quietly withdrawn. A war that had been hours away dissolved into awkward small talk and recalibrated expectations. Later, much later, after the chamber emptied and the galaxy collectively pretended none of this had almost happened, we sat together in a quieter corner of the palace. No board. No audience. Just two people who'd accidentally rewritten diplomatic protocol. She studied me with an intensity that made me shift in my seat. You are aware, she said, that many now believe humans possess a unique seduction ritual involving cardboard and small plastic houses. I winced. We're really trying to move past that. Too late, she said, amused. Several delegations have already requested cultural exchanges. Please tell me they're joking. They are not. I laughed despite myself. Great. Earth finally gets taken seriously, and it's because of monopoly. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You satisfied me without touching me. The translator stayed mercifully quiet. That's a first, I said. For me as well, she replied. I believed satisfaction required victory. Control. Superiority. Her expression softened. You showed me it can come from being understood. I met her gaze, feeling something settle into place that had nothing to do with politics. You showed me not everyone who asks for help wants to be rescued. Silence stretched between us, comfortable this time. Charged, yes, but grounded. The kind of closeness that didn't need grand gestures or dramatic misunderstandings to exist. So, she said eventually, what happens now? Well, I said, on my planet, this is usually where someone suggests food. Her eyes lit up. Sustenance following emotional intimacy is a human custom? It's practically sacred. She smiled, slow and dangerous. Then I accept. As we walked, I noticed something strange. The palace felt different. Less oppressive. Less performative. Guards nodded instead of glared. Advisors looked relieved instead of calculating. Somewhere along the line, losing with grace had become more impressive than winning with cruelty. At the entrance to her private quarters, she paused. You know, she said lightly, if you remain here, there will be expectations. Of course there will, I replied. There always are. She tilted her head. Would that trouble you? I thought about Earth. About going back to fixing machines and explaining to my supervisor why I'd delayed an interstellar incident by filing for bankruptcy. I thought about the board, the laughter, the moment she'd realized she didn't have to win to be worthy. No, I said honestly. I think I'm good at expectations. Especially the ones no one talks about. She reached out, fingers brushing mine, not gripping this time. An invitation, not a claim. Then stay. I did. Weeks later, Earth exported its first shipment of board games under the classification Diplomatic Tools. Monopoly sales skyrocketed. New editions were printed with revised instructions emphasizing emotional resilience. The galaxy adjusted. As for me, I learned something important. I didn't conquer an empire. I didn't seduce a princess. I just taught the most powerful beings in the universe how to lose, together.